Analog hardware, how much does it actually need maintaining? Good question, because it doesn't, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff doesn't need maintaining. Certain things over a period of time do need calibrating. For instance, we've got an Unfair Child 670M Mark II, and every now and then we go through a calibration process, calibrating it, checking all the tubes, checking all the calibration, making sure that it is bang on perfect. And 9 times out of 10 it hasn't changed since we last calibrated it, and it's perfect. But it does need a calibration every now and then. Certain pieces of equipment, yeah, you know, they need slight maintenance. And when you compare a piece of hardware to a piece of software, software generally doesn't break unless an operating system physically makes it stop working and it isn't updated. But generally speaking, a plugin doesn't break. A piece of hardware can fail every now and then. That's why we have warranties. And it's not like once it fails you can't get it fixed. For instance, my SPL-PQ, currently has a problem with booting up. It will boot up and then it will switch itself off, and then all I have to do is turn it back on and it's fine the next time round. But it's just sometimes that happens, and that obviously doesn't happen with the plugin, but it does happen with the piece of hardware. It doesn't change the kind of the performance of the piece of hardware, but it's just something I have to do every now and then. It doesn't boot up correctly, so I just switch it off, turn it back on, and away it goes. So yeah, I mean, that's the only thing you've really got to worry about is at some points things, you know, wear and tear. Pots, for instance, my Alicia Muss EQ, every now and then, it's just a Muss EQ. Has to have a little bit of WD-40, the kind of, I don't know what it is, but not your standard WD-40. Don't go spraying that into it, but the one that's, it's like 100% alcohol, whatever it is. Spray some of that in, perfect. It removes, sometimes what it gets is a bit of static in the pots. So you just give it a spray and it's perfectly fine. I do it once a month. And that's just, you know, part and parcel of owning that piece of equipment. I don't really get too much, you know. The other thing to mention is a certain piece of hardware going to the cheaper end rather than the higher end. The buttons that are on these pieces of hardware, I mean, I remember I had an Icon door controller, and basically the buttons had a lifespan. You could only press them, let's say, 20,000 times. I'd pressed it over 20,000 times and it become a bit unresponsive, and you really had to press it in order to kind of to click it. These things happen over a period of time. Good hardware like the SPL-IM, for instance, the SPL-PQ, that one, like I mentioned, had this power failure when I turn it on. Got to turn it on again if it doesn't boot up correctly the first time. I can take that, it's probably about 5 miles away, to the shop, the proper SPL place that I can get it fixed, and I could get that fixed. It will cost me a little bit, and it'll probably need a new power supply put inside it, and it'll probably end up costing me about £500, but I can get it fixed. I'm not going to get it fixed right now because it doesn't actually bother me too much. But if it persists and it becomes more of an issue, I'll have to go and get it fixed. So, you know, maintenance does cost. For instance, another one is the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. Now we've got the Octograph, renowned for lights just going out. You can do, like, the last thing you want is to buy a Shadow Hills mastering compressor, one of the lights goes out, and you have to send it all the way to America to get fixed. You don't. That sort of thing, you could potentially do something like that yourself if you're able to. You could even order the parts probably from Shadow Hills and get them over and then do it yourself. Or, you know, certain things like that, you could find someone local that could do things like that. So certain things Like these things do happen, and touch wood, they don't happen to me. I mean, look, it's part and parcel of owning analog hardware over a period of time. If you don't touch it, for instance, it starts to. You'd think that if you didn't touch anything for a long period of time, it would just pick up where it left off. Not necessarily the case. If you're constantly using it, it's almost better to just be constantly using a piece of hardware, because it keeps everything working. I've always found that I've left stuff in a cupboard for a long period of time, come back to it, put it in, and I'm like, oh god, this needs a little bit of maintenance done to it. So yeah, I mean, there is factors at play when it comes to maintaining pieces of equipment, and it's not something that you experience when you're working with plugins. So, you know, there's a pro for plugins. I don't have many of them, but there is, you know, that's a pro. That's what plugins don't have to deal with, but hardware does. Yeah, I don't really know. There's nothing really else to say with that. Maintenance comes at a cost. For instance, here's one I'll just mention, is the Unfairchild, for instance. So we've got the Unfairchild. Now, if the valves, the tubes on that go and they need to be replaced, which at some point they will need to be done, you're talking £1,000 to £2,000 to replace them. And that's not cheap. Now, some people might go, what? You pay 14 grand and then you've got to replace valves in, like, I don't know, 5 years or whatever, and pay another 2,000. Well, yeah, that's just part and parcel of having something like that. And for me, the pros of owning one well outweigh the cons of having to replace the valves in, let's say, 5 years. Hopefully I won't have to. You know, we've had that maybe a year and a half, a year, and it's good as gold. It's brilliant piece of equipment. But yeah, analog hardware does need some maintenance every now and then. Not a lot, but sometimes it does.